We're live now, thanks, Chair.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Janet Thompson, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board and the call-in today. I would like to welcome you to this virtual meeting. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedure apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the Chair. While members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? Right, I've got the agenda. Have we got any apologies?
Yes, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillors Garvey, Saunders and Uddin, and Councillor Hubbard is in attendance today as substitute for Councillor Saunders. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Have we got any declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Right. Agenda item 3. At today's meeting, the board will consider the call-in request that was received by the Council's monitoring officer in respect of the Nunthorpe Grange Farm disposal, Church Lane, report that was approved by Executive on the 24th of November. The Mayor, Andy Preston, the Executive Member for Finance and Governance, Councillor Chris Hobson, the Executive Member for Regeneration, Councillor Ashley Waters, Ian Wright, Director of Finance, and Richard Horniman, Director of Regeneration and Cultures, are in attendance to explain the reasons and rationale behind the report and the decision that was made. Councillor John Rathmell, the proposer of the call-in, and the supporting members, Councillors Hill, Hubbard, Plano and Wilson, are also in attendance to explain why the decision has been called in and what should be reviewed. In terms of the procedure that will be followed at today's meeting, a copy is included at Appendix 3 of your agenda packs, but I'll also briefly go through it now so that everyone is clear as to how the meeting is going to be conducted today. In the first part of the meeting, I'll invite Councillor Rathmell, the proposer, to present this case, and Councillor Rathmell has a total of 15 minutes allocated to him to present his case. Following that, I'll invite the executive members, Councillor Chris Hobson and Ashley Waters, to ask any factual questions that they may have about the information presented. The executive members will then have 15 minutes to explain the background of the decision, and Ian Wright and Richard Horniman, the service directors, will be able to deal with any matters of detail. Councillor John Rathmell will then have 5 minutes to ask any factual questions of the Mayor. At that point, the presentation element of the meeting is complete and we'll move on to the next part of the meeting, during which OSB members will be invited to ask questions of either party. Following those questions, each party will be given the opportunity to present a closing submission with a maximum of 5 minutes for each party. I'll then open the floor for debate, and following the debate, a vote will be held on whether OSB members feel the decision should be referred back to the exec for the reconsiderations. I'll talk about those aspects in more detail when we reach that point in the meeting. I'd therefore now like to introduce Councillor Rathmell, to invite him to present his case and explain why the decision has been called in and what should be reviewed. And Councillor Rathmell, I'll remind you, you've got 15 minutes to present. Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not actually going to take all 15 minutes. I think it's quite a simple one to look at. The primary focus being inadequate, no and inadequate consultation with regards to the whole disposal of this site and the future use. It does state that it falls outside the local plan and the local development plan policy document. But one thing the report seems to omit are the considered uses for this site, other potential uses, and it also doesn't underpin which policy document the council are choosing to rely upon in order to identify the best possible use and future use for this land. It seems to omit all of that information. Not only that, it didn't go out to tender process, and from all appearance of the report, no other options were considered for the use or retention or further disposal of the land. Therefore, members can't be assured that they're getting best value for money. It seems to be a thing for the authority, and it's something we should consider, given that we've had our accounts qualified on the value for money element on a number of occasions previously. Not only that, the report regarding the decision was taken in two parts. One was public, and the financial elements and commercial elements were taken in private session. It was so private that some of those factors were published on social media. Therefore, it creates the perception that it's a behind closed doors meeting with published information going on social media from a confidential part of the meeting. I have been fortunate to see the confidential part of the report. One thing that is clear, the information that has gone on to social media isn't supported in the part B of the report, i.e. the financial element for the community with regards to breakdowns, supporting evidence and information from the Chief Finance Officer contained within the report or anybody else. I believe it was a decision made off the cuff and without access to full considered information. So really, this isn't inside any, or it's not evidenced which part of the council policy framework this is following, what other uses were considered, and which part of the council's policy they adopted in order to explore those and consider those options. The first I became aware of the disposal of the site was when a council officer approached myself, my ward colleague, and members of the parish council last year, and it was not on the asset register for disposal at the time. We were told that. It was made clear that it's something they would consider, but we would be kept informed.
John, can I just stop you there 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Councillor McTighe, can I ask if you could mute yourself, because we can hear some background information and I can't hear Councillor Rathmell. Thank you.
Well, it says mute on my screen.
No. Caroline, can you mute Councillor McTighe? She's not muted. Thank you. Sorry about that, Councillor Rathmell.
No, thank you, Chair. No, we were advised that it wasn't on the register for disposal at the time, and we would be notified and kept informed at every step of the process. But it seemed to leap from being something the council were potentially considering to an exec member report and no consultation. The other thing that is of a primary importance with regards to this is the fact that it didn't go out through any kind of tender process. It was an approach made by the purchaser, and all discussions have been held behind closed doors. So how can they be assured that they've obtained best value for money and achieved the best? With regards to the consultation, it wasn't just disappointing for ward members, it was disappointing for ward residents, many of which have expressed that discontent, because we're meant to be in a period of openness and transparency, and it feels as if that's lacking or has been lacking with regards to this. I note the executive member presenting the report at the meeting stated that they believed it would be the best use rather than housing for what residents of Nunthorpe wanted, but myself and residents are at a loss as how that can actually form part of an opinion or a decision-making process when there was no consultation. And to that end, I think I'm going to end it there, because it's straightforward. There was no consultation. Nothing states which policy framework was relied upon. And it's just been one of those decisions that shouldn't have been dealt with in two parts if you're going to put part two or elements of part two on social media to mitigate against the annoyance of residents. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Rathmell, for your presentation. I'll now invite the executive members, which is Councillor Waters and Councillor Hobson, if they would like to ask any factual questions to Councillor Rathmell. It's the two executives at the moment, Councillor Cook. You will get your turn, but it's just the two executive members, which is Councillor Waters and Councillor Hobson. Right, I'll bring in Councillor Hobson. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rathmell, I believe you got an email on the 29th of January telling you of the intention to dispose of this land. I also believe that you had a meeting on the 4th of February with you and the parish council. And then there was another email on the 4th of November reminding you that this land was going to be sold. From those meetings and emails that you've had, did you go out and consult your residents at all, please?
I did, thank you, Councillor Hobson. And the actual conversations with the officers were saying this was a consideration of the authority. I consulted with the residents, and it was also brought up at the parish council meeting. The information was fed back to the officer at the time and the opinions expressed.
So you actually consulted with the residents?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have to ask. Thank you, Chair.
I can't see Councillor Waters. Your video's not on. I'm not sure if you're wanting to ask any questions of Councillor Rathmell.
I've got no questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Thank you for that. Right. We've got. Thank you, executive members. I'll now hand over to explain the background of the decision to Ian Wright and Richard Horniman, service directors. Would you like to come in, Richard Horniman or Ian Wright?
Shall I go first, Richard? Is that okay? Thank you, Chair.
Fine, yeah.
Thank you. We'll pick up different aspects that are relevant to our service, please, Chair, if that's okay.
That's fine, yeah.
Can I ask a point of clarification of Councillor Rathmell, please?
Absolutely.
When Councillor Rathmell refers to the asset register for disposal, does he mean the asset disposal control sheet, which we maintain as part? Okay, thank you.
We discussed that previously, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for the meeting, so thank you, Councillor. So I've reviewed those asset disposal control sheets, and this proposed disposal has been on there since January 2017, when that process was commenced following the asset disposal policy being passed in December 2016. So it was on there. The site didn't go out to tender, that's quite correct. And therefore we need to consider the value for money. Obviously, when disposing of assets or anything else, the council's not obliged to tender. That's one method of demonstrating value for money. It's not the only one. I know from a number of the sales that have taken place in the past that have been controversial in the town, often they did go to tender and there's still been questions raised. The thought process behind this was that it's a specialist use. So the disposal is for a specialist use, i.e. a place of worship, and a specialist purchaser, a religious group. We have a professional valuation done of the site before we sold it, and the offer price is 33% in excess of that valuation. And it's that evidence that we base value for money on. So that is why I was content for that to go forward as value for money disposal. In relation to the points around consultation, Councillor Hobson's already raised the discussions that took place, so I will leave it at that. And in terms of the confidentiality, I think from my point of view, as far as I'm aware, nothing from the report has been placed in the public domain. So the reason that Part B of the report is confidential is principally to do with the offer price and therefore the negotiations with the purchaser and us following that through. What I'm aware of has been made public is what was in the minutes that's in the papers for this meeting. And obviously that's not in the paper. I don't think that affects the confidentiality of the paper. So that would be my position on that. And they're the pieces I was going to pick up. So I'll hand over to Richard Horniman, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Chair, I was going to pick up the point about the local plan. The local plan doesn't have this site in, obviously designated as a place of worship or anything like that. But the sale of the land doesn't indicate that we're giving it planning permission. There is a separate process for the applicant to apply for planning permission, and the land sale is predicated on them securing a suitable permission at some point in the future. So the two processes are separate, albeit there is a safety net in there for us that if they don't secure planning permission for that use, you know, because of the local plan or because of any other issues, that we don't progress through with the sale. So we're protected from that perspective.
Right, thank you for that. Right, now I'm going to open up to the members of the OSB. I'll bring in Councillor McTighe, and then I've seen your hand, Councillor Hobson. So, Councillor McTighe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Can I just ask, or suggest or whatever, the financial position this town is in now, surely it must be imperative, if we're selling anything at all, to get the maximum price we can. And should it not have been put out to tender? I know you got 33% above the price that you're expecting, but you could have got 50%. And to put it out to tender costs no more than an advert in the Gazette or something like that. So I would suggest in future, anything that we're selling off within reason, we should try and get the maximum price. And we can only do that by putting it out to tender and letting prospective buyers know about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor Hobson. I did see somebody else's hand, but Councillor Cook and Martin. Thank you. I've seen you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to come back on a couple of points. If we didn't sell this land, we would have to maintain it anyway. So there's the amount of money there for maintenance of it. And according to my portfolio, obviously it was a good decision to be made. And we were getting, as far as I could see, we were getting real good value for money. It's a religious group. It's not going to have hundreds and hundreds of cars on the road if it was going to be built on by developers. And as I say, from my point of view, it was a good value for money. It had been valued, we were getting the value for money, and we wouldn't have to maintain the land. But as Richard said, it would also have to go to planning. So it will go out to residents. When it goes to planning, they'll all get the chance to have their say on whether it goes ahead or not. That's when the most consultation would be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, I'll bring in Councillor Marston. I have seen Councillor McTighe, and I've seen Councillor Smiles, and I have seen Councillor Story. I have made a note, and I will get to you. I've written you down on the list, and Councillor Hubbard. So, can we go to Councillor Marston?
Yes, hello, thank you, Chair. Just a query on the use of this land. Would there ever be a possibility of it being used for housing? And the point about the religious group who were using it, I'm aware of this group, although not a member of. The volume of traffic would be quite restricted and not huge, so it wouldn't have a huge impact on the area as would a housing development. The question is, could it be used for housing? Thanks, Chair.
Who's your question directed to, Councillor Marston?
Sorry, it'll be to Richard Horniman, presumably.
Yeah. Richard, comment on that.
Will do, Chair, thank you. In theory, a housing developer could have made a bid for the land, but we would be very unlikely to sell it to a housing developer because we're very, very clear that that is not an area that the people of Nunthorpe want to see further housing development. We would never intentionally put it out for that use, I don't think. Hence the reason it's not in the local plan as a housing site. So I think it's highly unlikely that we would ever do that, in the knowledge that the opposition to it would be very, very intense. It could go out as a housing site in theory because it's a reasonable piece of land for that. It's just not something that we would ever intend to do.
Right.
Thanks, Chair.
Ian, did you want to come in? Thanks for that, Richard. Ian, did you want to come in on behalf of that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to this specific sale to the group that is looking to buy it, there will be a restricted covenant, and that is in the papers, that will prevent it being used for housing land. It would only be usable for a place of worship, just on this particular sale.
Thank you for that clarification, Ian.
Chair, can I just ask, there was a mention of a maintenance cost to this land. Do we have any idea what this cost is? Thank you.
Who wants to reply to that? Go on, Ian.
I don't have a specific figure for that, Chair, because it was used as farmland previously, and therefore we haven't started maintaining it yet, so I can't actually give a figure.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Marston? Right, we'll move on now to Councillor Cook. Councillor Cook, do you want to ask your question?
It's sort of a point of clarification. There's been reference made to some sort of social media posts or some sort of leaked information. Is that anywhere in this document so that we can actually reference and see what information was put in the public domain to sort of help us work out what decisions being made?
Who's going to answer that question? Can somebody answer Councillor Cook's question?
I can come back on that one, Chair, if you like. The information I saw was a financial element for the community as a result of the sale of the site. It's not contained in any of the reports, either Part A or Part B. It doesn't provide any how the calculations were worked out, the decision-making process, or any supporting information from officers. So that's the whole point. Members haven't received sufficient information to make a decision, but members of the public have seen the information. So it's not really helpful to any party that private and confidential meetings, information from that is being published online.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cook?
Not really, but I don't know if I can. Can I ask instead then, there's a proportion of the capital receipt, 43,500. How was that calculated? And is there a strict formula for this that can be applied to other sales of land across the town? I know that when the land in Newport was leased, obviously the community see no sort of financial benefit for that. So I'm just wondering if this formula is going to be taken forward and how it's calculated.
Ian, do you want to take that?
Certainly, Chair, thank you. The figure, which was in the minutes from the executive in November, is £43,500. That was calculated as a percentage of the capital receipts. Now, as this is a public meeting, I don't want to give the percentage of that capital receipt because it will tell you what the capital receipt is, which is the exempt information, which is what's in Part B of the report. But it was a percentage of the capital receipt. Also, what was resolved is that we would look at making that a policy for the council's assets going forward. And on the forward work programme, there's a report due to come to executive in February, setting out that policy going forward to apply to asset disposals throughout the town. Thank you, Chair.
That answers your question, Councillor Cook?
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you. Right, I'll go to Councillor Smiles. I've got you, Councillor O'Donnell, you're on the list, but I'll go to Councillor Smiles now.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mine's more of a short statement really than a question. Is that okay?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so I feel like at the heart of this is obviously the development on Nunthorpe's green space and also our needs as a community. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff going on from the Gazette, from the exec, and I think an example of this is that we're going to focus on more development on brownfield sites, such as in the town centre and over the border as well, and that takes the sort of focus for development away from Nunthorpe, which has borne a lot of the brunt and a lot of the negative implications. I feel on this occasion, though, I do have to disagree with my exec colleagues on this decision. And I feel at the heart of that is the consultation. I feel that initially we were kind of presented with it confidentially. And it did go out to wider consultation, but it was more or less a blob on the map. That it was kind of a concept rather than any real detail given in terms of what this hall might consist of, the pros and cons, all of that kind of information. And also I feel like there's things that sort of by far eclipse Brethren Hall in Nunthorpe in terms of requirements, such as our community centre that we need. And I think that the Gisborough bypass is a kind of red line for many people in terms of development. And I suppose I'm quite worried that if the hall was to go ahead, it might kind of open the door for housing around it. So I think it would be good. I did oppose the decision on the exec, and I think if the exec could take another look at it, that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Snars. I bring in Councillor Story. Councillor Story.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, I was wondering in terms of this particular development, was any consideration given to any other usages for community use? I know Councillor Smiles has just referenced the community centre, but were third sector organisations approached? Was there any sense of looking at other potential alternative uses for this? Because this isn't a community building for the whole of the people of Middlesbrough. It's a religious place of worship. So would it not have been better to at least have canvassed whether there was a potential community use for the site? And I'd have one further question after that, Chair, from me.
I'll just bring Councillor Rathmell. Do you want to respond to that, Councillor Rathmell?
Well, looking at all of the reports and speaking to the officers in the confidential meetings with them, there were no other options considered for this site, no other uses. It was directly for religious purposes. So it didn't go out to any other third-party organisation or consideration for other use for community benefit. It was solely for the religious use and religious purpose, which, as again, is the point I've raised with regards to the reports. There's nothing identifying which part of the policy framework the authorities relied upon for solely singling out that one particular use.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Story?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me that in any kind of tendering process, or if there was canvassing done of who might be interested in the site, the council may have been able to get a picture of what else could be done with the site, not housing, but certainly a community use of a different nature that perhaps might be more amenable for people locally. And also, I mean, obviously we'd have to take account of the financial aspects too. The second thing I wanted to reference is something, again, Councillor Smiles has kind of briefly referred to it there. One of the concerns I would have as well is that the fact that this is kind of south of the bypass, and the concern I would have is that if you wanted to develop something like this, couldn't this have been accommodated in any of some of the developments north of the bypass? Because there are other areas due for development elsewhere in Nunthorpe, and isn't it potentially the case that if this goes ahead as it is written now, it opens up that side of the bypass to potential further housing developments, which is something that people in Nunthorpe certainly do not want to see happen.
Can I bring any of the officers in to answer that? Richard or Ian, does anyone of you want to answer?
I can certainly come in on that last point, Chair. One of the things that we're currently doing is working with the parish council at Nunthorpe to be very clear about where we would and where we wouldn't look to develop housing in the future. And there are no plans to develop further housing to the south of the bypass. And that's one of the things that we'll be looking to enshrine in some sort of compact. Now, obviously, there are existing, as an example, just in case this comes back to me, there are other buildings already there, such as the farmhouse, that are likely to be used for housing again, but obviously within the current structure. We're not looking to use any of the green fields or anything down there for further housing development, and we'll be putting that in the compact with the parish council. So I completely understand that residents might fear that that's the case, but we're going to put something in place to take that fear away.
Can I on that as well, please, Chair?
Yeah, of course you can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, currently working on the local plan. Again, as part of the Mayor's strategy, we are identifying brownfield sites in the central land, which takes the pressure off Nunthorpe. The previous administration had all this land set aside for housing in Nunthorpe, which inevitably will come forward, but we will be putting no more of that land forward for housing, and we will absolutely protect that land in Nunthorpe. I think that's really important to state, that we will not be looking to put more houses in Nunthorpe on top of what was already in the 2014 local plan.
Councillor Story, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Right, thank you for that. Bring in Councillor McTighe. Councillor McTighe, Can I
Yes.
just shout to people, if they have a question, can they say whether it's one the question directed to the officer or whether it's directed to Councillor Rathmell? I've got your name down, so Councillor Ty.
Sorry, Councillor Thompson, I missed the first part of that sentence.
What it is if people are asking questions, can they say who the question is directed at? Is it directed at an officer or to Councillor Rathmell, please?
Okay, fine. My question is directed to Councillor Hobson. She made the comment that one of the benefits would be that we wouldn't have to maintain it. Now, I do hope that that isn't a consideration that's going to be used in future when we're selling off land, because, you know, playing fields have to be maintained, but it's not an excuse for them to be sold off to save the cost of maintaining them. And my second question is, if you'll indulge me, Chair, is to Councillor Waters. Can he identify some of the brown sites in central Middlesbrough that he's just talked about, please? Oh, sorry, finally, to the Officer Richard Horniman, you mentioned that it was never going to be used for house building. Is that a cast iron guarantee, Richard? Because, you know, some of us old timers here, we've had promises made before about such things. And then, you know, 2 or 3 years later, they find a way around it. And there's a U-turn. So is that cast iron guarantee written that cannot be changed, that there will never, ever be houses built on that land? Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'll take Councillor Hobson, the question directed to her first. Councillor Hobson, can I respond to Councillor McTighe?
Thank you, Chair. No, Councillor McTighe, that actually, the consideration for disposing of this land was value for money. I just said if we didn't do it, we would have to maintain it. That wasn't what was considered at the time. The actual value for money was considered. Thank you.
Right, I bring Councillor Waters in. Do you want to answer Councillor McTighe?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a number of sites coming forward in town as that's been made public. Obviously, we have the Gresham site that's been sat there empty for numerous amounts of years. We've got the area all across Middlehaven tying in with Boho X. We have sites actually in the centre of town itself that are coming forward that are being worked on as we speak. So there's a number of different, we're working on around about 4,000 houses in the centre of Middlesbrough, which obviously takes the pressure off the outskirts and the greenfield areas of land around town.
Right, thank you.
Chair, you haven't asked me if I'm satisfied.
I was going to take the three answers.
Okay.
Richard Horniman, do you want to answer your question?
Will do, Chair, thank you. With respect to this site in particular, there are obviously no plans to ever put housing on there. In respect of the other green fields around it, there are no plans to put housing on there, and the new local plan that's going to come forward won't have any proposals for housing in there. Now, obviously, taking on board your point that a council can say that one day and then a plan can emerge, that's the reason that we're entering into the compact with Nunthorpe Parish Council, to give a much more cast iron, longer term guarantee that those sites are not something that we're going to be bringing forward for housing. So yes is the short answer, but there will obviously be detail to come out through that compact that will set that in the correct wording.
Councillor McTighe, are you happy with the answers? You need to unmute.
I did, but somebody keeps reversing it, as happens to other councillors too. And I suggest it's an officer. They don't give us a chance to do it. Yes, with regard to Councillor Waters' answer, 4,000 homes, you said? Could you be a bit more specific? Who's building them? Are they going to be for sale? Are they going to be social housing? And when is this going to go in the press? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Waters, would you like to respond to Councillor McTighe?
A lot of this has been put through the presser, and I don't believe that this meeting's actually to go into the detail of the houses that are being built in and around town at this present time. There's a number of executive reports and council reports come forward for all of this, and if Councillor McTighe would like to contact me to get further information on these sites, I'll be more than happy to provide you with that information.
Right.
Chair, can I just say, like a lot of other councillors, I don't buy the Gazette. And rather than me having to go to Councillor Waters for the information, now we know that I need it. Could I ask that he sends it to me in an email, please?
I'm sure Councillor Waters will oblige with that. I'll bring in Councillor Hubbard.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask a point of clarification first? I feel a part of this meeting's missed because I know Councillor Rathmell gave his presentation, then it was open up for questions, but then shouldn't have went to the executive member to give their report, and then Councillor Rathmell given 5 minutes to ask questions. I feel that part's been overlooked.
No, I did bring in the executive members because Councillor Hobson and Councillor Waters, Councillor Hobson spoke. Councillor Waters had nothing to add, so I did.
So Councillor Rathmell didn't want to ask any questions for 5 minutes.
Well, did Councillor Rathmell want to ask any questions? If Councillor Rathmell wants to ask any questions, he's got the opportunity to ask questions now.
But that should have came back on the back of the report, Chair. That's what I'm saying. And was he given that opportunity? Because I've got questions for the executive, but I just didn't hear their report. That's what I'm saying.
There was only Councillor Hobson who gave a report. Councillor Waters didn't give a report. So now you've got the opportunity to ask questions to Councillor. The questions is open to everybody now, and you can ask questions to Councillor Rathmell can ask questions to the executive members. You can ask questions to the executive members. So
okay then. All right. Thanks for that, Chair. Could I ask why did the executive members state they got best value for money if it didn't go out to tender? How do you know that it's got best value if it doesn't go out to tender? You wouldn't know unless it went out to tender.
I'll bring in Councillor Hobson. Do you want to answer that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. It was well over the what the value of the asset was that we were offered. So on that basis, and on the basis that it wasn't going to be a lot of houses, I thought it was very good value for money.
I'll bring it. Did that answer your question, Councillor Hubbard?
Well, it still doesn't state how they can be assured that they've got the best value for money when it didn't go out to tender. That's impossible. You can only know that if it goes out to tender.
Right, I'll do. I wanted to scan. I'm aware that you want to speak, Councillor Waters, but I'll bring in Councillor Hobson, and then I think Councillor Rathmell wants to come in before you, Councillor Waters. So I don't know whether you want to add any more to that, Councillor Hobson. Do you want to add any more to it?
No, that's all right. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'll bring Councillor Rathmell and then I'll bring you in, Councillor Waters. Councillor Rathmell, did you want to come in on the back of that?
I had a couple of questions actually, Chair, but I'm quite happy to ask them now. First one is back to Councillor Hobson. She asked, did I carry out any consultation? So I'd like to ask Councillor Hobson the same question because it's clearly omitted from the report, and she put forward a viewpoint of residents' preferred use. So I'd like to know what extensive consultation she carried out, if any. The other part that we've keep hearing, and this one's perhaps for Richard Horniman, which policy document did you rely upon to determine that this was the best possible use? Because I've mentioned it and asked it a few times and nobody seems to be giving the answer. And then finally, going on to Councillor Waters, you've referred to you're in consultation at the moment, and the Nunthorpe Grange site, you're limiting the number of properties to be developed on there. But the reality is that's not going to be limited until a new local plan's brought forward. And the current administration were very slow in starting the ball rolling for a new local plan. Speaking with planning, it took at least 12 months before the work to commence, and it's not a document that can happen overnight. It can take 18 months plus. So at the moment, the Nunthorpe Grange site is vulnerable to development until we have a new local plan. Is that not correct? And a final point, perhaps Councillor Waters might be best placed. Regarding the compact, we've heard how it provides long-term guarantee for residents and security, and that's going to be entered into. But my understanding is that's only a 10-year guarantee.
Right.
So it's not long. So if you could go through them, that would be
Yeah,
great.
I'll bring them. I'll respond in the order that you've put them in. So the first response would be Councillor Hobson first. Councillor Hobson, do you want to respond to Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. No, I didn't go out to residents and ask them what they felt. I do know that residents want to keep greenfield sites, as I do myself, and I thought that this was a better option than going out and having it open to developers, where 150, 200 houses could be built on the site. So it was my opinion. I do apologise, Councillor Rathmell, if I didn't make that distinct in my in the meeting. Thank you.
Right, I bring Richard in. Richard, do you want to respond to your question, to Councillor Rathmell's question to you?
Yes, Chair. Well, when we're selling a piece of land, or we have a piece of land on the asset disposal register, and somebody makes us an offer for it that is acceptable, what we don't have a policy to do is to go and think, well, what other uses could we put on there? It's on there for a reason that it's surplus to our uses. And if somebody has a use that is proven to be compatible through the planning process, then that's an acceptable use of the site. So in terms of the policy framework, there isn't a policy for that, because that's not something that we do.
Right, thank you for that, Richard. Right, I bring Councillor Waters. Do you want to respond to Councillor John Rathmell?
Yeah, just on a couple of points. So firstly, what I wanted to talk about was the tender of the site. The pricing that we secured for the land reflected housing values. So the only other option to increase the land value would have been to put housing onto it, which the community and the residents of Nunthorpe don't want. So again, I totally appreciate that money can't be seen here, other than the fact that we got 33% more than what the asset value was deemed at. But other than actually putting the house out for tender, the site out for tender for housing, then we're not going to get a higher price for that. And I genuinely do believe that. Onto the local plan. Yes, the local plan didn't start straight away. It had to be tied in with the Mayor's strategic vision for the town. That is underway. Obviously, COVID has delayed things and pushed things back, but we are working on protecting the rest of the land around Nunthorpe to ensure that it does not get built on, does not get used for housing. So other than offering the guarantee that we are working on it and expediting it as quickly as possible, it's not something that can be rushed. It is a detailed plan. It does set out the plan for the next 10 to 15 years for the town. So it is important that we get this right. It's important that we get it right for everyone across the town. With regards to the compact made for the parish council, we can't go more than 10 years in the future with it. It is something that we are making an agreement on. We want this agreement with the parish council, and it works for the residents of Nunthorpe, and it does tie in with what we want to do with the local plan, setting out a 10-year vision. So I think it's the right thing to do for the 10 years. We can't do it. We shouldn't do it for more than that, because times do change. Things will change in that time. And if it's still at the point in 10 years' time where we need to go back to the parish council and keep that in place, that's something that we will absolutely do, I'm sure.
Councillor Rathmell, are you happy with your responses from Chris Roberts, Councillor Hobson?
Yeah. I mean, I acknowledge their responses, Chair.
Thank you for that. I'll bring in Councillor O'Dane. I've got Councillor O'Dane, Councillor Cook, and Councillor Cook who wants to come in. So I'll bring Councillor O'Dane. Councillor O'Dane?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I thought you had forgotten me there. Yeah, for a minute. Thanks anyway. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One been asked, but I'll mention it. The other one is quite important for me, really. Which the religious group is this? Because the religious group, different group have the different needs. And some religious group covered just for the local area, and some were covered the wider area. And somebody mentioned earlier on about the traffic, obviously the transport, transportation, all this. So that's which religious group I'd like to know. And the other question was to, obviously both questions for Councillor Robson or Councillor Walters, I think. Yeah, the question was that asked that Chris Robson answered, but I'm not quite happy with that answer, to be honest. When somebody asked her about the consultation, we heard from Councillor Rathmore, but Councillor Hopkins, she hasn't consulted it at all. Well, I mean, obviously, this isn't her duty as well, whether herself personally or she should delegate the responsibility to consult. So she says she hasn't had the consultation. So that's which one anyway left it open. And the other one is which the religious group is this based.
Right, I think Councillor Hobson, do you want to answer that question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Udden. No, it is not in my remit to go out to consultation. My remit is to look at whether we get value for money. And on this occasion, I felt we were getting a good value for money, and that was why it was signed off. It is not down to me to go out to consultation. The consultation time will come when it goes to planning, and everybody that in Nunthorpe, no doubt, through Councillor Rathmell and Councillor Smiles, will get to know about it then. They will all be able to send in their comments when they want to. So as far as I'm concerned, no, it isn't in my remit to go out to consultation. Thank you, Councillor Udden.
Councillor Udden, we have to do that response.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
What was your second question directed to?
Sorry, the other question was which religious group is this? As I was saying, because some group covers just religion. So therefore, obviously, there's some impact on the local residents as well if they really wider group.
I'll bring Councillor Rathmell on that one.
That should be Walters or Councillor Hobson.
I bring Councillor Rathmell because he lives in the ward, so you might be able to answer Councillor Udden's.
Thank you, Chair. It's the Plymouth Brethren, and they're not limited or restricted to Nunthorpe. And I know Councillor Morstan has referred to traffic, but actually it has posed a severe problem for Nunthorpe Ward, and it's been the subject of enforcement activities and speed watches with the police because they're a religious group who tend to be reliant upon larger vehicles and 4x4s. And a lot of concerns being raised by the community about not adhering to speed limits, and they travel from Gisborough, Stokesley, further afield into Nunthorpe to their current site in Marton East, which is right on the border of Nunthorpe Ward, and it's on a daily basis and it's multiple times a day, and we're not talking one or two cars. It can, depending on the occasion, be 100 plus. So I think to say that it's going to have less of an impact than a housing estate is possibly wrong for the vehicle use, and that's another concern as to why other uses weren't explored, because obviously you would do some kind of assessment if you thought it would be have a lower impact for residents. You wouldn't just assume that a religious group would be the best use for a site.
Councillor Zinn, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, but again, I think as the Councillor Rathmell mentioned, if it's a wider group, obviously it's going to have the more impact on the affected area as well in terms of traffic and so on. So that's as another concern to be, addressed with.
I am aware, Councillor McTighe, I've added you to the list, but I'll bring in is that all right, Councillor Udden?
That's fine.
To Councillor Cook. Councillor Cook, did you have a question?
Yeah. Can I ask one question, and based on the answer, I'll ask a second question?
Yeah.
Ian, is it possible that you can tell us what year the site came into council ownership?
Thank you, Chair. I can't. I can tell you that it was part of a council farm. So the council owned a number of farms which were rented out to tenants. And on that basis, I'm going to say to you, it's definitely decades. I can't give you an exact year, Councillor.
Okay, so then my question is to Councillor Hobson. One of the sort of reasons for not having this land in our ownership you sort of stated as we won't need to maintain it. As Ian just stated there, we've had this land for decades, but not maintained it. So why was that even a consideration? Because I find that quite misleading.
Councillor Hobson, I'll bring Councillor Hobson in and then I'll bring Ian in. Councillor Hobson, do you want to respond to Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Chair. We didn't maintain it because it was run as a farm. So the farm people maintained it themselves. Now they've left and gone to another farm, then we would have to maintain this site.
All right, I'll bring Ian in and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Cook. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Just as a supplementary to that, Councillor Cook, there was a decision taken a couple of years ago for that not to be a farm anymore, and that was a decision taken by the council. And at that point, the question of maintaining the land becomes relevant. Thank you.
And what was the year of that, Ian?
I believe, and I will confirm the committee, but I believe that was 2019 or 2018.
It's still a significant amount of time that we haven't maintained it. So
That's
it's
right.
not like there is an ongoing cost which we're currently facing that we will not be facing should we sell the land, which is why I find it a bit misleading.
Just to be clear, that was the date of the decision, and I will confirm the date of the decision. There was then a time frame before the tenant farmer left the land. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Cook.
Yep, thank you.
Right, I'll bring in Councillor Coop.
Thanks, Chair. I've just going back to the decision around what the land can be used for, which has been mentioned, and I know it's been cleared up, but I would be concerned about two things. That is definite. You can't just suddenly apply for something once you've moved in, oh, we'll have a couple of houses on the land as well. That would go through planning, I understand that. Why I also applaud the deal done with Nunthorpe, etc. I don't want to make sure that was what has been said today, that, okay, there's no houses built in Nunthorpe, but we don't want too many houses built across other areas as well, like Stainton, for example, where I represent. I know there will be building across the town, and I accept that. I do applaud the idea of 4,000 houses going into the brownfield sites, and I would encourage that, as long as we can get people to actually move into them, depending on the type of the houses, etc. So I just want to understand the policy of this, that yes, you can sell this piece of land, and yes, we can say right on that is going to be for a particular purpose. It shouldn't be looking at a more criteria to allow the council, if you like, to decide on areas, say, right, this will be developed for that, and that will be developed for that, and absolutely put it in stone in the local plan, that it can't be changed afterwards, and it can't be challenged in the court. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to respond to that, or Richard?
Thank you, Chair. I can respond on the specific thing about this site that we're talking about disposing of. That is a covenant that will be written into the deeds that will only be released if this council in future chooses to do that. And you can see that by the report here, where the previous covenant was released as part of this executive decision, if this decision is to go forward. So it would need to be a democratic decision of this council in the future in relation to the specific site. Okay.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Coop?
Yes, I'm just hopeful that that will stand under the court of law. Thank you, Chair.
Now, I've got Councillor McTighe, but I know I'm also aware Councillor Wilson wants to speak, so I have got you written down. So I'll take Councillor McTighe next.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm glad somebody asked about what religious sect it was going to be, because I would like to invite Councillor Morstan to come here to Beechwood on a Saturday and Sunday and see the horrendous parking problems we have because of the Jehovah's Witness. It's absolutely horrendous because it's there's no other church for that religion anywhere near. They all congregate here. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Councillor Mawson, are you wanting to come into Councillor McTighe?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm aware of, I haven't read it, but I'm aware of the problems that Jehovah's Witness create down Beechwood. Response to Councillor Rothwell.
I just ask if people can mute the mics if they're not speaking. Quite a lot of interference. Thank you. Sorry about that, Councillor Marston. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The present site of the Plymouth Brethren place of worship is in a a residential area in a very narrow lane, as Councillor Rathmell and the council will be aware of. It's Gypsy Lane beside the Martin Railway, sorry, Nunthorpe, Gypsy Lane Railway halt. It is the wrong place. It shouldn't have been built there in the first place many years ago. That's too late. You cannot compare the effective traffic in its present location that we'll have in the proposed location. Thanks, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. Can I just remind people that questions that are going to be asked are really for to Councillor Rathmell or to the executive members. So I'll bring in Councillor Wilson, and then I'm aware, Councillor Rathmell, you want to come in. So I'll take Councillor Wilson first.
Thank you, Chair. A few years ago, the Plymouth Brethren, when they first came into the area, they started off a HGV bodybuilding business. Now, I don't know where they are in the area now. I'm just wondering if they can utilise any part of the site to enlarge their building of bodybuilding for HGV vehicles. Could they expand their business on that site? Just what I'm wondering about, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that point would be... Ian, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the restriction on the site is for use as a religious place of worship, not for commercial purposes or indeed for residential purposes.
Right, thanks for clarification. Right, I'll bring in Councillor Rathmell. Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to clarify Councillor Marston's point, with reference to the comparisons between the current site and the new site, it was in response to your direct comparison, stating that it would be less of an impact should the move to the new site. Well, yes, it would be less of an impact to their current location, but it wouldn't be less of a detriment to the ward that both myself and Councillor Smiles represent in respect of traffic and speed volumes.
Right, thank you for that. Has anyone else got any more questions? Councillor Hubbard and Councillor Polano and Councillor Platt. So I'll take Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks, Chair. This is a question for one of the two officers to answer, please. I'd just like to know if the correct procedure is being carried out in accordance with the asset disposal policy.
Ian, do you want to come on?
Thank you, Chair. The answer to that is yes.
So there's a business disposal case?
There is, and it was appended to Part B of the report, Councillor, yes.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Polano.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't know who to direct this to, but it's a question in my mind that why should a religious group need such a large space of land for specific worship? I mean, I worship in St Mary's Church. I go to many of the churches around, and a church is a church. So if you're a religious group, even a mosque, it's not a specifically big place. Why do they need an enormous piece of land?
Who wants to respond to that?
I don't know who to ask it.
Ian, do you want to respond to?
I don't think I can comment on why they need it or their particular religious practices. It's a preference, and that's what they'd asked to buy, and therefore that increased the capital receipt to us. So I don't think I can really comment on the whys and wherefores of the particular group. Thank you.
Fine. I'll bring Councillor Rathmell. Did you want to come in on the back of that?
Yeah, I'm just speaking from the knowledge that myself and Councillor Smiles have of speaking to the officers and seeing the proposed plans for the site. There's multiple different uses on the site, not just religious purposes. There's ample parking, but there's also an orchard, vegetable gardens. So it's actually going to generate more use than a religious building that they currently have, because there's going to be a lot more maintenance and activity going on up there. And that's what the plans were. So whilst we've not been consulted now, and we would be consulted should a plan come forward, the council at the time of making this decision were aware of some plans and drawings which we've all had access to.
Right, does anyone want to? Right, I'll move on then to Councillor Platt. I know Councillor Platt's got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just thinking, if you don't sell the land to these people, This is for Councillor Smiles and Councillor Rathmell. Who would you be happy to sell it to and for what?
Councillor Rathmell, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I would, Chair. In response to that, Councillor Platt, currently in Nunthorpe we have no community facilities. We do have one, but unfortunately it was part of a Middlesbrough Council ran school which has been transferred to an academy. When the Middlesbrough Council offloaded it as an academy, they afforded no protection whatsoever for the institute. So gradually the space is being diminished, and we've got one usable space for community use. And we're restricted in the amounts and the hours we can use it. It can't be used on a weekend, can only be used with the school's approval, and it's limited to between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. That site is a prime site that could have been considered for potential community use. And given the number of developments Nunthorpe has had, the number of Section 106 agreements that have been raised to create benefit for the community, there's potential to site a purpose-built community facility in that location.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Platt?
Yes, thank you.
Have we got any more questions from anybody? Councillor Smiles, do you want to come in?
It was just to come back on Councillor Platt's question about the preferred use. I think anything, like I said previously, on the other side of the bypass would need really, really serious and careful consideration. But I do think that residents would by far prefer a community use, like a community centre, rather than the current proposition, which is a Brethren Hall, which would only be for a certain religious group.
Right, thank you for that. Have we got any more questions? No? Right, there's no more questions. I'll invite both parties to give their closing submissions. I'll take the executive members first, so that's between Councillor Hobson and Councillor Waters. I don't know who wants to go first. Councillor Hobson, do you want to go first?
Yes, Chair, I'll go first. All I've got to say is that I made this decision for the fact that it was value for money, and I was quite happy with the fact that it wasn't going to be built on with a developer, and there's not much more I can say than that. Thank you. I don't know whether Councillor Waters has anything he wants to add.
Councillor Waters, is there anything you want to add to Councillor Hobson's statement?
Yes, please. I think I'd just like to clarify and go over the points that have been made to this now. So the members, Councillor Rathmell State members, provided insufficient information to take the decision. Some of the information provided was misleading. This site is on the disposal list, which we can evidence. The site does fall outside of the local plan. This has nothing at all to do with land sales. Our sites are sold subject to securing an appropriate plan, and there is a full statutory process for the purchase to go through to secure this. The sale does not provide them with planning permission. Secondly, the site did not go out to tender and no other options were considered. The price secured is, like I say, reflective of housing values on the site, so the only other viable option to get more money would have been to put it out for housing, which the residents of Nunthorpe do not want. No inadequate consultation undertaken. The purpose of consultation is to provide the opportunities for people to respond and give their views, although we normally would not normally consult ward members about land sales. There have been multiple opportunities for this to occur, and the following sets out those opportunities. Wednesday, the 29th of January 2020, Councillor Smiles and Rathmell were emailed to inform them of the intention to dispose of the land, to confirm the date of the forthcoming executive committee meeting, scheduled to determine the proposal and to offer them a briefing if so required. Due to the 4th February 2020 meeting to brief both Councillor Rathmell and Ken Tomlinson, the parish council chairman. Wednesday, the 5th of February meeting to brief Councillor Smiles, and then going on Wednesday, the 4th of November 2020, email Councillor Smiles and Rathmell to remind them of the upcoming sale. The report also references that ward members will have to have their opportunities to input their views through the planning process. Lastly, the report regarding this decision was taken in two parts. Yes, it was. This relates to the decision to provide the local community with a proportion of the land sale proceeds, which was determined at the meeting. It wasn't planned and wasn't in the therefore could not have been withheld by officers. It was something that we decided on to give back to the residents in Nunthorpe that needed, or we felt needed, that 106 money to put into community facilities and to decide what they wanted to do with that money. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like Councillor Rathmell, can I invite you to give your closing submission, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. With respect to the representations and the closing submissions made, I think it's quite poignant that consultation has been described as Councillor Smiles and Councillor Rathmell received a notification of the council's intention to sell the land. And then again in February, Councillor Smiles and Councillor Rathmell received a notification. Notification is significantly different to consultation. And Councillor Waters is right, there wouldn't normally. But when we've got pledges coming from the mayor at every opportunity that we're open, we're transparent, we want to involve communities in shaping their community and making decisions, then you think consultation rather than notification would be the way forward. We've heard from officers that there isn't a policy. It falls outside the local development framework. It falls outside of the local policies. There isn't a policy in this scenario. We've heard about the £43,000 that's been given to Nunthorpe for community facility, was the example Councillor Waters used. Fantastic. So the executive managed at the last minute to identify an alternative potential use for the site, a need for Nunthorpe, which is a community facility. But instead of actually considering that before they made the decision, carrying out the necessary investigations and looking at alternative uses, they didn't. They didn't go out to the market, they didn't go out to the community, so they haven't established whether they've achieved what is best for Nunthorpe or what is best value. There's a lot of reasons why the decision is unacceptable. We can't go into an era of transparency and openness and not consult. We can't identify there's a need for a community facility but throw money at the problem, because £43,000 doesn't give you a community facility. Land does give you the opportunity to use a space as a community facility and then in the long term develop an actual building. But land can actually provide a community facility, whether it's another green space, whether it's playing fields for children. These are all the things that we've lost in Nunthorpe, and we're at detriment of losing to a solely one religious group, a religious group that was identified by council officers because they approached the council. Well, if religious use was a great opportunity, why wasn't it explored as an option prior to being made a single approach? And we've quite rightly heard there isn't a policy in this scenario. It falls outside the policy framework. And whilst I know that the Overview and Scrutiny Board have a number of options available to them, when something falls outside of the policy framework, which is set by the full council on an annual basis, then it can be referred back to full council so that we can either improve, implement or create a policy that protects communities, not just in Nunthorpe, but across the town from future disposals, developments and use. And Chair, the final point would be that on this occasion, because we're batting outside of the policy framework as an authority, I genuinely believe that this should go back to full council. I would be pained to see it go back to the executive member, having seen the little consideration and the contempt shown to previous call-ins, and the fact that when previous decisions have been challenged, been successful and sent back for reconsideration to the executive member, the executive are that concerned they require democratic services to remind them it's actually something they need to make a decision on. So because we're outside of the policy framework, I would like to see this go back to full council for debate, discussion and reconsideration.
Thank you for your summing up. Now, we've now heard the case from both parties, and therefore I'd like to open the floor to members of the board for debate. I'd also like to remind members at this point that they may ask further questions of the members making the call-in or the decision makers or any other people present at the meeting. The members making the call-in and the decision maker will not normally speak except to answer questions, so just bear that in mind. So We got any more questions? Right, I've got Councillor Cook and Councillor McTighe. So I'll bring in Councillor Cook and then Councillor McTighe.
Thank you, Chair. I think almost regardless of this decision or what happens next, Ian has referenced something today regarding how we'll move forward regarding land sales and how the money will go back to communities. I would like to see something formal done around that, whether it be a piece of work that goes to a relevant committee or back to OSB in general. I would really like to see that sort of process formalised to make sure that we know that communities are going to get a good deal from any sort of sales that happen or that impact them.
Does any of the officers want to make any comment on Councillor Cook? Ian, did you want to come in on that?
Certainly, Chair, thank you. Yes, absolutely. As I say, we are intending, and it is on the forward work programme, we'll bring a report on this. I believe we're in discussions about consultation with Scrutiny around the budget process, and it might be a good idea to widen that to discuss this as well, so that Scrutiny members can have some feedback before we bring that policy forwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor McTighe.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Councillor Hobson. Very briefly, can she just describe how the council went about finding this particular buyer? Did we make it public that the land was available, or did this religious company just approach the council saying, "Have you got any land?" And can I just remind her that the value of something is only what somebody is prepared to pay for it. And you can't find out the value of something unless you widen your scope and let people know, here we are, we've got this piece of land for sale. What are you prepared to offer us for it? We may have only got £10,000 or £5,000 more had it gone to tender. But, you know, we're in a position where we have to count every penny in this council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson, do you want to respond to that? Councillor Cook, I've got you noted that you're wanting to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was the brethren that approached the council. They actually knew they had to, they wanted to move from the brethren hall that they've got on Gypsy Lane, and this piece of land suited their purposes. So they offered over and above what was the price on the asset register. And can I just also add to Councillor Cook that the money will only be for sales, extra money will only be for sales of land that belongs to the council. There will be private sales that go on where there won't be any negotiations. Thank you.
Councillor McTighe, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, I bring Councillor Coop. Councillor Coop, did you have a...
Yes, thanks, Chair. Can I just firstly say that I do know members of this particular religious sect, not too far, very close to me, and they do have lots of big cars, but they never cause any problems to me or anybody else I'm aware of. Having said that, Councillor Erdin and others raised a good point about use of community centres. When, for example, the church in Stainton decided to sell some glebe land for building, there was a community centre on that, and the church then built onto Stainton Church a room, a millennium room, built in the year 2000, and it is not just for church use, it's for everybody's use. Would there be any chance that the communities could perhaps use the Plymouth Brethren site, or is it private for them and thus effectively a private dwelling? Because lots of religions do use the Church of England, the Catholic Church, etc., and Muslim faith. I'm not going to any particular faith here. A lot of them do use that for use. I'm just wondering if this community would as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody want to respond to that? Councillor Rathmell, I've got Councillor Marston and Councillor Higgins. So I'll take Councillor Rathmell.
Just in response to Councillor Coop, they're a very private religious order, so much so that their children that were in local schools had to be segregated and weren't even allowed to face each other during meal times. Now most of them are educated in York on a daily basis at a private school that they've built that's of their running. They're a very private religious group, and they don't like being looked upon by anybody outside of the religious order. For example, their buildings you will find don't have windows that face onto anyone or any other land or people, because they're a very private group. So the potential sharing for community facilities, they would be probably more against it than the community would having this facility here.
Right, I move on to Councillor Marston. Councillor Marston, did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, just confirm what John said about the privacy. It extends further than that to their own housing, in fact. But can I just say that on the Ordnance Survey map, ironically, that church is indicated as a community centre. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, I'll bring in Councillor Higgins.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say that I think it's a good idea for this to go back to full council rather than just the executive, because, well, we've seen what's happened with the call-ins, and I think this is such a big issue that it deserves a full council meeting for everybody to put their thoughts into it. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that comment. I will have to bring in Charlotte Benjamin. Can we refer that back to full council, Charlotte, as one of? Because I know there's on the action plan, it's got refer it back to the exec. Take no further actions. Or I need some clarification. If Charlotte, you could.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to clarify the correlation between the rules on call-ins and the budget and policy framework procedure rules. So if I could request a short adjournment while I look into that, that would be very welcome.
Right. So as there's no more questions, Councillor Rathmell, I'll bring Councillor Rathmell, Councillor Hubbard, and then Councillor Smiles. Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the monitoring officer, the policy framework is what helps set the budget, formulate the budget, and it also is part of the decision-making process of the authority as a whole. It's considered by full council. Now, we've heard from officers here that this falls outside of any policy or framework, and at least certain elements do. Therefore, an option has always been to send it back to full council. It appears that it's an oversight in the new guide that's been put out regarding overview and scrutiny, and to not send this back to full council when it's perfectly entitled would set a precedent that every call-in is pointless, because it will go back to the executive and will have to be reminded they've got to reconsider. And on such an important issue, it would be reckless to not send it back to full council and follow appropriate course of action and use the decision-making body of full council. So,
can I come in on the back of Councillor Rathmell's point?
Yeah.
If possible. Chair, that's why I take on board what Councillor Rathmell says, and I note what's in the agenda pack that members will have seen at page 4, and it's paragraph 16, little Roman numeral 5, which suggests that if there is a suggestion that the matter contravenes the budget and policy framework, that it should still go back to executive. However, what I'd like to have an adjournment to check is the position in the constitution on that point, because on the face of it, there seems to be a contradiction between the constitutional position and the position in the agenda pack. So if I could request perhaps a 5-10 minute adjournment, then that would be useful, please.
Right, I'm going to go for that adjournment. So we'll have 5 minutes adjournment. Thank you.
Charlotte, are you still online?
I am, John, yeah.
In the constitution,